We're going to be talking about past auctions, upcoming auctions, different real estate markets across the country. We've got a lot of topics today to help us out. We've got a really fine guest that I'm excited about hearing. In the past year, we've had some major guests on this show. We've had Congressman Jeff Denham from California. We've had Congressman Long from Missouri. We've had Congressman Micah from Florida. We've had Congressman Duncan from South Carolina. All great people, and they've done a fine job. Today we have an exciting guest. They're going to be calling in shortly. They're from Dallas. It's Ed Delgado. He's the CEO of the 5-Star Institute in Dallas, Texas. And we've got our first call. Okay, I missed him, but hopefully he'll call back. Ed runs the 5-Star Institute, which is the 5-Star Conference. It's a conference that's held each year in the fall, gets up to 5,000 people. It's really the real estate and mortgage conference of the year, and just a great handshaking, find out what's happening, educational, movers and shakers are there. I've been there many times. I've had a chance to speak at their conferences about auctions a couple of times. Good stuff. Very, very excited about Ed calling on, and want to remind everybody that the radio show mission statement is provide an educational experience for listeners in a promotional format for auctions across the country. This will be our, I think, 18th or 19th month on the show, so excited to continue. All right, we've got the caller back on. Good morning, you're on the air.
Good morning, Doug. Ed Delgado here.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for calling out, and I've been introducing you in the meantime, but for our guest, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do and where you're from, sir?
Well, thanks, Doug. It's always a pleasure to be back on your show. My name is Ed Delgado. I am the president and CEO of the 5-Star Institute. 5-Star is a trade association based here in Dallas, Texas, and we represent the mortgage and real estate markets.
Well, you have been there for a while, and I've seen the conferences grow with your abilities and skills. Last year, you had a huge conference, and I don't want to take it away from you, but I mean, President Bush and President Clinton and Mayor Giuliani. I mean, what a cast of excellent speakers, and it's really the place to go to as far as you said, real estate and mortgage concerns.
Yeah, thanks for the compliment. It's often said, and those that go to the conference will come up to me and say, in these tough economic times, they don't have the ability to attend as many conferences as they have in past years. However, if you're going to go to one conference that encompasses all of the facets of mortgage banking and real estate, the 5-Star Conference in September is the place to be. And they say that all the time. If I'm limited to do one conference a year, I'm choosing 5-Star.
Well, the educational facet, the top speakers, but almost as important, it's trying to get business, and you're meeting with your peers, you're meeting with people that might give you business, you might be meeting with people you may hire in the future. I mean, I always thought it was the best real estate mortgage conference in the country, and I truly believe that. So again, kudos to you. But Ed, let's take a step backward. tell us about your background. Go back a few years and tell us what you used to do before you took on the hat of the CEO of the Five Star Institute.
Doug, you're making me feel old. But yeah, I'm happy to do that. My background primarily is in mortgage banking and finance. Started in New York in the early 90s with a thrift known as Dime Savings Bank, and I led their mortgage operations for about 5 years before being recruited by Freddie Mac. Just to date my tenure for your listeners, when I was working at Freddie Mac, the stock was trading over $60 a share. And as you know, and your listeners know, it was delisted when it fell below 25 cents a share.
Right.
So that tells you how ancient I really am. But at Freddie, we had some interesting responsibilities. I led structured risk finance for the organization and structured sales, where we were pooling and selling assets, distressed assets, on the open market. And there was an arbitrage in the pricing scheme at that time, and we did very well. I spent about 10 years at Freddie working in various roles, but predominantly on the loss prevention side and the data side. And subsequent to that position, went to Wells Fargo for about 7-8 years. Wells was and is a fascinating organization. They have probably one of the best and most talented mortgage groups in the nation, which is why they hold such a large market share in today's times. But at Wells, I started off managing their data and analytics division for the mortgage company. And then, just by happenstance, attended a meeting in Washington with then Secretary Henry Paulson and Assistant Secretary Neil Kashkari, and was tapped to take on several very visible roles in D.C., working along with the executives at Wells, but also my peers across the industry in formulating policy through the Hope Now Alliance and through various programs initiated by Treasury, all designed to prevent foreclosures and promote homeownership and market stability. And that was just a fascinating time, even though it was at the height of the crisis in 2008, 2009, in the first part of 2010. It was just an unbelievable time of change and secular change for the industry. So I was honored to be part of that. Long hours, right, Doug? I mean, we work 7 days a week, probably 12 to 14 hours a day, but meaningful work to be certain. And then wanted a little bit of a career shift. I opted to join the Five Star Institute, which I had been a fan of for years and had always been a strong supporter and believer in their testimony as it relates to the housing market. And Five Star, you should know, well, I know you know, but your listeners should know, is much bigger than conferences. We have 2 trade publications, DS News, which focuses on default servicing, and the M Report, which focuses on the performing side of the business. It's Legal League 100, the National Servicing Association, the Force, which is a federation of REO agents and brokers. So we really touch on all of the major facets of mortgage banking, whether it's real estate, originations, mortgage servicing, foreclosure, bankruptcy, REO. The Five Star Institute has strong representation in all those verticals.
Well, DS News is really the mainstay of keeping in touch with what's happening, and you do that in a couple of different ways. The DS News magazine that comes out, the editor, Carrie Bay, is terrific. She does a wonderful job. But you also have something that's called the Daily Dose from DS News that comes to me because I signed up, and it is a great, I'm going to say, 4 or 5 topics that happened during the previous day that is going to have an impact if you're in the business. And tell us a little bit about that and how you do that, and also how do people sign up for that?
Yep. Well, first I want to, I know she's going to be ecstatic that you mentioned her name. Carrie Bay, who's the editor-in-chief of DS News, has done a fantastic job over the years really building out that brand. The Daily Dose was something we came up with a few years ago. And what it really, I think you nailed it. It takes the top stories of the day and puts them out there. So it's interesting that one of the marketing pieces that we came up with was a cup of coffee. And the reason why that was is one of our readers said, there are two things I do when I wake up in the morning. One is I get my cup of coffee, and the second thing I do is I look at the Daily Dose to get the top stories.
Nice.
So it has really grown over the years to be kind of a mainstay in the industry. And, if you click on any of the lead stories, it'll take you right into the DS News website and give you the full story behind it. And your listeners can just do that by going to the DS News website. And you can get there two ways. One is by going to the 5-star and then dsnews.com. And you can click on the Daily Dose link and subscribe. There's no cost, obviously. It's just information for our supporters. And it is a fascinating source that really shouldn't be overlooked.
Well, I watch it and look at it every day, and my peers do also, because I get if I don't read it carefully, I'll be surprised because one of my peers will send me something to do. See Daily Dose today, and here's the link, and either I'll say, yeah, I've already seen it, or geez, I missed that, so because I'm traveling. So thank you.
Yeah, Doug, one other thing I'd like to just throw out there. The other thing that we came up with a couple of years ago is breaking news alerts. Given the volatility of the industry and the marketplace, your listeners can also get free breaking news alerts. So if something's happening that's relevant to mortgage banking and finance, or quite frankly to the economy, we pushed out alerts on economic and unemployment data, housing starts, earnings reports, foreclosure rates. As those data points become available to the public, and generally before widespread publication, we will put out a breaking news alert to anybody that subscribes to that service. And again, it's 100% free. There's no charge. We just do that because it's the right thing to do to support the marketplace.
Well, breaking news, that's a good segue for me. I'm not sure it's breaking news, but I think it's something that I've really had a passionate thing for in the last year, and you and I have talked about it. It's the fact that the government has 14,000 government surplus properties that they're holding, and they need to sell because it costs billions of dollars to hold these properties, and the American taxpayer doesn't know it. And these are not houses. This is not talking about Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. These are warehouses. These are office buildings, tracts of lands, things from courthouses to old VA hospitals. It's pretty interesting, and you and I have talked about it, and people don't really realize those holding costs. So give us your spin on that. People, the general public, don't realize how much it's costing them every day.
Here's, if I may,
Yes.
I know it's not an op-ed, but I want to comment a little bit on something. I find it to be egregious that, in a point in time where so much attention has been placed on the housing market, and so many rules and regulations are being espoused and rolling off Capitol Hill in terms of how servicers should behave, and standards and protections and qualifying rules and conditions and behaviors, that you're sitting on 14,000 government surplus properties at a potential exposure to taxpayers in excess of $15 billion. And I just find it to be appalling that it's almost diversionary, right? Don't tell me to clean up my room when yours is just as messy, if not worse. It doesn't make any sense. So, this is government waste at its worst level. And I share your concern, and if I may for a moment applaud you being kind of a catalyst for change in this space, because I know you've worked with members of the House and the Senate to effect some type of remedy, but it is simply appalling that we have that many properties that are vacant or underperforming, and the burden of which is placed upon the taxpayers. You want to talk about a fiscal cliff? Go clean up your backyard in Washington, folks, and figure out how to manage these properties. And apologize for some of the passion behind it, but I think it's simply wrong that nothing has been done to remedy the circumstance.
Well, Ed, I just think it's a win-win situation for everybody. It's great for the politicians, the Democrats, Republicans, the senators, the House. I mean, the president is the one who brought this to everybody's attention, but it was back in his State of the Union address, which almost is 2 years ago now. It was in 2011. He said, we've got a lot of government surplus properties we can sell. It will help the holding cost and alleviate the burden for the taxpayers, and also the sales proceeds could help us in our tax deficit. And it just is amazing to me that, here we are 2 years later, bills have been passed. Congressman Denham has passed a bill, 14 oh boy, I can't remember now. It's been so long, but he's passed a bill that unfortunately didn't get taken care of last year. Went to the Senate, wasn't passed, and so now they got to start all over again. And it was passed in the House by both sides of the aisle, and it was it's just something that I would think. It's an easy way to raise money. It's an easy way to stop expenses on the budget side. It should be like, oh my gosh, Mr. Congressman, elected official, we're in love with what you're doing. This is great. Tell us more.
Yeah, look, it's what you're describing to me is really dysfunctional politics at the expense of taxpayers. Right, that's what it boils down to. We're kicking the can down the road, and again, respectfully, as the president made those remarks in 2011, in business, when you go to execute a policy or strategy, efficiency and timeliness is paramount. You could say a lot of things and do a lot of things, but then if you don't actually take it across the goal line, it's somewhat meaningless, and it's been politicized, and the entire housing market's been politicized, quite frankly. But this particular condition, with nearly $15 billion of exposed taxpayer money, and at a time when we're so focused on budget deficits and wasteful behavior and just actions of total disregard for value, I think. If there is something that you can do or something that your listeners can do to just keep at it and keep writing and calling their political leaders to effect some change here, I think it's absolutely the best that we can do right now to help rid this condition from the budget.
Well, I'm looking at my notes, and I apologize. It's H.R. 1734, Congressman Denham passed, and
right.
And just to give you an examples, and the post office annex in Washington, D.C., that costs the American taxpayers $6 million a year in holding costs has been vacant for 10 years. I went down to...
How much was that again?
That's $6 million in holding cost a year, and it has been vacant for 10 years.
But, wait, I want you to finish that point, but here's something that you have to take into context. $6 million. If you were to extinguish that and say, look, we want to provide we're going to take this money that generally would be used to support these properties. We're going to sell these properties at auction. We're going to use the funds of that in a couple areas. We want to help stem the tide of foreclosures. We want federal programs. And I know that we came up with the hardest hit areas programs, and I know that it met with some nominal success. But why not say, let's divest ourselves of these wasteful properties and use that money to help preserve single-family home ownership in the United States? Do you have any idea how many homes can be saved with just $6 million alone? It's just I struggle with it because I've seen foreclosures firsthand. I've seen families put out on the street. I've seen their personal belongings put in boxes and left out there. I've seen children crying when they come home from school off the school bus, and they see their mother outside or their dad outside, and their house is being shut down. don't tell me you can't fix this problem. This is not something that requires an enormous amount of thought. So, that number, that one property that you're describing, Doug, in that post office, is just, it's an abomination. Just fix the problem.
They are trying to work on it. They've got a possible lease that they're working on with Donald Trump's firm. But this actually hits home in a whole bunch of different ways, because if that building isn't being used, or other buildings aren't being used, number one, it affects values and it affects businesses in the area. And these properties are not paying municipal taxes. They're not helping the tax base. And so if you get a private sector buyer in there, and I thank you so much for talking about auctions, because I think in the government sector it's the fairest, most transparent way to go about it, and of course brokers are very involved in the process with auctions that we do. But if we can pull this off, and I think it's going to need the help of you and I getting out to all of the professionals that we know and try to get them to contact our elected officials to move this forward.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that more, maybe offline, but somewhat related. Five Star is going to host its government forum in Washington, D.C. On April 23rd. We do always attract attendees from the Department of Treasury, Housing, Urban Development, Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, Department of Justice, CFPB, and other elected officials. I would like to submit to you that would be the time for us to have a very meaningful dialogue. If we can get Jeff Denham, who introduced H.R. 1734 to the table, I think that's an important discussion that needs to be had.
Well, I would love to do that, and I want to talk more about the government forum. We're going to need to go to our break and sell a couple of ads, but I'm hoping, do you have time, Ed, to stay on for a few minutes of these ads, and then I want to get into the government forum. I want to talk about this year's 5-Star Conference and your crystal ball about the mortgage and real estate marketplace for the future. Would you be willing to do that?
Don't get me started on the market, but yes, I'm happy to do it. I'll stick around for a few more minutes.
All right, very good. Folks, you're listening to Ed Delgado. He is the CEO of the 5-Star Institute in Dallas, Texas. He's going to hold on while we go for a short break. And folks, thank you for listening. We will be right back. All right, we are back. You are listening to the National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. I am your host, Doug Dennison. We have on the line Ed Delgado. He is the CEO of the 5-Star Institute, famous for the 5-Star Conference, DS News, the Daily Dose, and much more, a leader in the industries and real estate mortgage. Ed, are you still with us?
I am.
Good. We were talking a little bit about the government forum that your agency and organization puts on. Give us those states again and tell us what it is, what you're trying to do up there.
Yeah, government forum is very important. It brings together many different groups from the mortgage industry and commingles them with political leaders and government agencies. So it is a coming together of the industry to talk about essentially the politics of housing and what it means to the housing market, what's the rules and regulations, what does Q3 mean, what does CFPB have up their sleeve in the coming year, what's the fate of the GSEs, how is HUD playing a role in originations and housing in general. So it is a fantastic opportunity for anybody who has an interest in understanding the politics of housing to sit in on various sessions. Last year, we had Ed DeMarco, who was acting director of FHFA, be one of the featured keynotes. We've also had the CEO of Fannie Mae, Michael Williams, when he was there, Dr. Raphael Bostic, who is one of the economists at HUD, Lori Maggiano, who is assistant Treasury Secretary. She has been there. She's over the housing office at Treasury. So you've really pulled together an amazing assembly of leaders to kind of figure out what's going on with this housing mess and what do we need to do to fix it. The date for that conference is April 23rd. This year we're hosting at the St. Regis Hotel off K Street in the center of Washington, D.C. This is our 5th year doing this conference, so it is a very well-established brand. It does sell out every year, and we're real proud of that. So if you're interested in learning more about the Government Forum, Doug, is it okay if I give out the website?
Oh, of course, of course.
www.thefivestar.com/FSGF. That's Frank, Sally, Green, Frank, for 5-Star Government Forum.
Sure. Well, I'm excited about it and looking forward to going up there and being with you and also getting my chance to knock on doors for congressmen to do something about these 14,000 government surplus properties. As you may know, I've had Congressman Denham, Congressman Micah, Congressman Long, and Congressman Duncan on the radio show saying, hey, we need to sell these properties quickly, and it's an easy way to raise money. It's an easy way to get rid of expenses that the American taxpayer does not need. But enough, I'm up on my pulpit here. Tell us about what you're thinking is going to happen this year. You have a very wide spectrum of people that you talk to and let you know what's happening. I did have the chief economist of the Florida Realtor Organization on a couple weeks ago, and it was very exciting, but that was more for just Florida. I'm looking for what the heck you think is going to be happening in 2013 in the national scope for housing and mortgages.
Yeah, I'm bearish on the housing market for a lot of different reasons. I'm an analyst at heart, so I take a look at the numbers, and they're frightening. And I think, what we're seeing across the country as it relates to housing is the bouncing ball, or fits and starts of recovery that give rise to speculation that really don't amount to much. For us to be in a sustained period of recovery, I'd like to see annualized house price appreciation remain consistently above 2.5% to 3%. We're not there yet. And I've said this for a number of years. It's incredibly diversionary for the administration to keep focusing on housing when unemployment is where it is today. You have, the December. I know January numbers are coming out soon, but the December unemployment rate nationally is 7.8%. That is so misleading. And, first of all, that number is unacceptable, right? That 7.8% is not where we need to be as a country when it comes to employment. Yeah. But what we don't pay a lot of attention to is the U6. This is a statistic that captures the total amount of unemployed or disgruntled people in the workplace. This captures people that are no longer eligible for unemployment, people that have had a significant reduction of income, those that are taking other jobs because they can't find a job to replace the one they lost at a much lower pay scale. That number is 14.4% nationally. So if you want to talk about unemployment, let's look at it from a broad perspective of what's happening in this country. So you have right now, so you take unemployment, and then let's look at the values of homes. You have roughly 11 million mortgages that are underwater. 11 million properties underwater.
Wow.
Another 2 million that have less than 5% equity, which means they're living from day to day, from check to check. One financial disruption, and they have to sell. They can't. The listing price alone, the real estate commission alone, will wipe out whatever equity position they have. They're done. You can't file bankruptcy as easily as you could in the early 2000s. So what are you left with? You have an exceptionally fragile market that is manic. I saw some numbers the other day and said, oh, look, we've hit a 5-year low in new jobless claims, and construction, new building is going up, and that's great. Watch where you're going to be in 3 months. Because sitting behind all of this is the shadow inventory of distressed assets. You have exaggerated timelines foreclosure timelines. New York. You know how many days it takes to foreclose in New York?
How
Doug?
many?
1,089 days.
Whoa.
1,000 days. So stop paying your mortgage in New York today. The dockets aren't going to hear you for 3 years. You know what that does to surrounding property values? You know what that does to the condition of the asset? You know what that does to pricing or sales capability? The entire market is just fractured. And now we're saying, well, that's not enough. Let's have more rules. Let's have more regulation. Let's make sure that everyone's doing their job. I have a better idea. Let's find jobs for people that are out of work because they have money and then they can pay their mortgage. You see, people don't lose their job because they default on their mortgage. People default on their mortgage because they don't have a job. So, I'm passionate about this because I just think it's incredibly, I guess you'd call it a fancy magic trick to say, look over here, look at how evil the banks are, look at everything, oh, they should have never made those loans. Well, unemployment remains at 8%. That's nationally. There are some markets where it's considerably worse.
It's something that needs to change. As people kind of on the sidelines, we're not in Washington every day. That's where rules change. But we've got to stand up and let ourselves be heard because they need our help. You understand Washington and many of the huge bills that are passed. I mean, they're monumental. They can't read them even. And we've just got to keep on pounding our elected officials in a caring and sharing way, but we need things to change for the better, and they're the way to do it.
But, Doug, you come out with Dodd-Frank, right? Dodd-Frank and the Financial Services Roundtable, which is a group I'm quite fond of and proud of my prior affiliation with, they've estimated that the average weight of statute implementation for Dodd-Frank is over $14 billion annually. Okay? $14 billion in cost to implement legislation that is so darn complex that it houses over 398 rules. Only 136 have been implemented, and that $14 billion is expected to increase in the coming years. So what have you done to affect meaningful change in the housing market to prevent foreclosures? The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency opened up a foreclosure file review. The response was so low and so diminutive in terms of consumers saying, yes, I feel that I have been inadequately and unfairly harmed in the course of action. Nobody responded. They just shut the thing down.
Wow. You
know how much money that cost? The outreach, the campaigns, the banks having to go ahead and delay foreclosures because we had to make sure that everybody wasn't harmed. Let me tell you something. People don't pay their mortgage because they don't have money, and I'm not making light of this. It's a pretty basic formula. If you don't have money, you can't pay your mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, regulation to me, look, there are some banks that were egregious. There were awful decisions made. Greed was the rule of the day in 2005 and 2006, and I have absolutely no shame in calling out those organizations that took advantage of people. New Century, AmeriQuest, Countrywide. That wasn't Chase. That wasn't Wells. That wasn't Citi. That wasn't Bank of America. Those banks were left surviving because they acted in a fair and responsible manner, and they're left to clean up the mess.
Mm-hmm.
So let's overregulate them and drive up their costs to a point that the entire process becomes frozen and laden with legislation at the cost of billions of dollars.
Well, what can we do when you're talking to the general public, you're talking to real estate professionals, you're talking to banking officials, government officials, real estate media that listen in on this show? What can we do to help make a change? Because I do believe that one person can make a change if they bark loud enough.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a compliment or you're saying I'm too loud.
No. Talking about me.
Look, Doug, here's what I'd like you to do, and I'd like your listeners to do. We cannot afford to be tone deaf to the real issues that are at hand, right? So I think it would be incumbent upon all citizens across the United States to demand clear and sensible job creation program that has real teeth to it, something that is going to put America back to work, that's going to relieve some of the financial burdens that people are having. I don't believe that the course that has been assumed has had any demonstrative effect on raising employment or improving the cost of living or, quite frankly, keeping people in their homes. You're looking at a shadow inventory of foreclosures. Ivy Zellman, who's a dear colleague of mine and who spends most of her time swimming in data and analytics, they're estimating nearly 6.3 million homes are on the bubble waiting to go to foreclosure. That is destructive to the housing market. So, we elect leaders to represent our interest in an unbiased manner. We elect political leaders to protect our interest. We elect political leaders to ensure not only our physical safety, but our financial safety. And I think meaningful dialogue with these leaders, and I think outreach to these leaders that demand solutions to the real problems. Okay, let's call it what it is. We don't have enough jobs. We all your listeners, and you included, we lived at a point in time where unemployment was as low as 4.5%.
Right.
The economy was incredibly stable, and that was post 9/11. So don't tell me it can't be done. You just have to work at this. And whether it's corporate tax credits, whether it's road programs, whether it's federal funded programs or state initiatives, we have to see a more comprehensive and meaningful job program. And Doug, you're the guy to do this. I mean, I think the work you're doing with these government surplus properties is demonstrative of the type of waste that's going on in Washington, and I would call to their attention something that's a little bit more practical and show me jobs.
Well, a part of my plan, when you sell these government surplus properties, instead of a property that has been abandoned for years and years and affecting businesses to the negative side, affecting values to the negative side, you get the private sector in there. The first thing they're going to do is hire new people. They're going to hire goods and services. They're going to make that place a place of business where income and expenses are taking place, and it's going to make the businesses and values around that abandoned property better. So in my small way, I am trying to help unemployment in our country.
Yeah, no, I think you are, and I think you're spot on in your assessment. Whether it's a commercial property, a government property, or residential property, anytime something is vacant,
yes,
it becomes a contagion,
yes,
right? It diminishes the value of surrounding properties. It diminishes the value of business. It impacts families. It impacts small business in particular. So, you got to start someplace, right? And I think working and focusing on government surplus is absolutely a great launch point for your concerns. But I don't think you stop there, Doug. I think you start focusing on the job sector.
Well, I appreciate that. Tell us a little bit about the 5-Star Conference coming up.
You got me all fired up now, Doug. I don't want to talk about anything else. I want to talk about jobs. You want to talk about something else. Let's get people back to work. Get me. I haven't had any coffee yet, and I'm getting all crazy. Now, the 5-Star Government Forum is the mortgage and real estate industry's largest convention, and it's the biggest in the United States. Conference, I should say, right? It's every year we host it in Dallas. There are nearly 5,000 people in attendance, and I appreciate you pointing out that past keynotes have included, we've had sports figures, we've had Joe Theismann, we've had Roger Staubach, we had Terry Bradshaw, political leaders, Giuliani, Mayor Giuliani, who was fantastic, President George W. Bush, twice, I believe, First Lady Laura Bush. Last year, Bill Clinton gave a stirring address to our audience. And in the interest of being bipartisan, we even had a debate between James Carville and Mary Madeline at one point. So it is a fantastic gathering. But at the foundation of this event is education and presentation. Our curriculum is written by economists, political leaders, financial experts, real estate experts, and there's training and discussion and meetings. It is a 3-day assembly that just should not be missed. we've had the chief economist from Fannie and Freddie. We've had so much coverage of the five-star conference. It's just been an astounding group of leaders that come to Dallas every year. This year, five-star conference will be held, as it was last year, at the Hilton Anatole. There's a reason behind that, Doug. It's so darn big. That's the only hotel that can hold that many people.
Right.
It is scheduled to be September 8th through 10th. And if you want to learn more about the conference, please go to www.thefivestar.com/FSC, or if you just want to learn more about five-star in general, go to www.thefivestar.com.
Well, you also give a price break if you do it early, if I remember correctly, and maybe a $100 off kind of a thing if you sign up now. And I think that's always a benefit, because you want to plan ahead, you want to be there, you do not want to be shut out of this conference.
Yeah, no, precisely. And going to the website, there is an early bird, early registration discount that I'm pretty sure is still in effect. It may have lapsed, but you know what? We'll figure that part out if we have to. If your listeners write into you or me, we'll extend that price cut. But it's currently $995. It seems like a lot in this economy, but let me tell you, for 3 days, you're more than getting your money's worth.
Well, like you said, if you're going to go to one conference, this is the one to go to. And I know that it's your job to say that, but I hear this from everybody.
Oh, I appreciate
and I'm
that.
talking about banking, government officials, real estate brokers, mortgage people, the whole thing. You have a great crew there, Kathy Riddick, Carrie Bay, Jason Myers, and many more people that make the whole organization look good. I'm looking forward to seeing you up in Washington. I look forward to doing more on this 14,000 government surplus properties and yes, Ed, jobs. And so one more time, give us contact information that they can go to the website and learn more about your unbelievable conferences.
Yeah, well, before I give you that website, listen, Doug, I just one more time want to applaud the work you're doing. You are an inspiring leader. I think this cause that you've taken up for these 14,000 properties is demonstrative of the need for collaboration and change across the marketplace. So kudos to you and your team. Five Star is an amazing assembly of business leaders, and we are so fortunate to have some of the most talented people working here, and I thank you for those compliments for Carrie and Kathy and Jason and everybody else at Five Star. Thank you. To learn more about Five Star or any of our conferences, our publications, DS News, M Report, Government Forum, Five Star Conference, Impact Conference, anything you want to know, training, education, certification, REO, real estate, please go to www.thefivestar.com.
And sign up for the Daily Dose. That is a wonderful thing.
It's free.
It's free.
It doesn't cost anything. Get the Daily Dose.
Ed, thank you so much for taking the time. You have a wonderful weekend. I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Take care, Doug.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Ed Delgado, Five Star Institute CEO and president. Passionate guy. I love what he's saying. And I thank him for being on for this whole segment. I knew that he had a lot to say, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't limit the amount of time he could talk for a 15-minute segment. I knew that you wanted to hear him for the full hour, and so that was wonderful. Let's go for a quick break, and we will be right back.
MarkNet Alliance is a national, membership-based network of 41 auction companies. Our companies are successful auction professionals with proven track records and thriving businesses. The MarkNet companies have a staff of over 540 employees who are working hard every day to meet the goals of their clients during our ever-changing economy. MarkNet companies are able to achieve these goals through cutting-edge technologies and ever-growing investor pools. To view the hundreds of auctions currently being conducted, or for more information, visit marknetalliance.com.
All right, we're back. You're listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio. We broadcast every Friday live from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida, the nation's oldest city, at WFOY 1240 AM studios. Great show. Ed Delgado, CEO of the 5-Star Institute, talking about what's happening, what he thinks the trends are, what he thinks is the problem up in Washington. We both beat up on Washington a little bit for not handling these 14,000 government surplus properties quicker, and I know that it needs to be done. I will continue on my rampage, if you will, to get this done. I think it needs to be done for the American taxpayer. Billions of dollars that we pay because of these abandoned properties that are not being used. All of the ill effects of having an abandoned property in a business area, the local businesses, the values of the properties around, it just needs to be done. Our sponsor is Rowell Auctions, and they have some big upcoming auctions. You need to go on their website. It is www.rowellauctions.com. That's www.rowellauctions.com. They are basically one of the leading auction firms in the country. They do a lot of bank auctions, a lot of absolute auctions. Absolute means it's going to sell no matter what. This usually brings more bidders. This usually is good for sellers and buyers. Buyers know it's going to be sold, so they can take the time and effort to research it properly. They have an auction coming up, 5,200 plus or minus acres in 4 counties in Georgia on January 31st. It's going to be at 10 o'clock on site in Bartow, Georgia. And again, that's Thursday, January 31st, 10 a.m. in Bartow, Georgia, 5,200 acres. That is a lot of acres, folks. And there's 4 or 5 new auctions that have just come on board. You need to go to rowellauctions.com. That's rowellauctions.com. They have internet bidding. They have a way to go and do a video, so you can see the video, and it tells you how to bid. It's not long. It's easy to look at and figure out what to do. And again, this is the way of the future. People like to bid at their own pace. It saves time and money going to auction ballrooms and hotel ballrooms and getting a room and the cost of gas, and it's much easier just to sit back in your flip-flops and your T-shirt and bid when you want to. And that can be 10 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock in the morning, or any time. Our sponsor, Rowell Auctions, is a national real estate auction firm that started in 1936. They do online auctions, on-site auctions, and ballroom auctions. They have offices in Florida, New Jersey, California, Georgia, and have alliances with auctioneers and real estate brokers across the country. They do government auctions, bankruptcy auctions, and much more. They have a big auction schedule coming up, so check out their website at www.rowellauctions.com, or you can call them at 800-323-8388. That's 800-323-8388. Again, a whole bunch of new auctions coming on. National firm. Go to that website and get the bargains that are there. Next week, we've got more exciting guests. I want to thank our guest for this week very, very much. Ed Delgado, CEO of the 5-Star Institute from Dallas, Texas, took the whole hour to be with us. I appreciate him being on the show and look forward to meeting him up in Washington very soon. Folks, you have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.